Thank you for being here today, and for coming and being willing to listen to this. I read this book a few years ago called High Conflict, How We Get Stuck and How to Get Out. It's by Amanda Ripley, and it really helps. She wrote it in 2020, I think, so it's 4 years dated, but we are still in the same midst of where we were 4 years ago. So I searched and scoured the internet trying to find a way to deliver it to you in a small fragment, and this is the best thing I could find. It's 43 minutes. We don't have to go all the way through the 43 minutes, but it gets to one of the things I want us to talk about at like around the 26-minute mark. So it's up to you guys if after 26 minutes you're like, all right, enough of the video, let's talk instead of doing this. I'm gonna start on the sign-in sheet. And then I also have handouts and I have some questions, thoughts that we might talk about when we get to that point, okay? Any questions, any thoughts about this? Should we pray real quick?
Yeah.
I'll give you me in a spirit of prayer. Holy God, our world is stuck in a lot of ways right now, and we come together this morning to look for what comes after, asking that maybe we find some common ground and some way to move forward, which is less polarized, less binary, and less conflicted. We ask that you open our hearts and allow us to try to be some of those change makers after listening to the wisdom of the day. Be with us this hour and for our worship. Amen.
Okay, since maybe start reflecting a little bit here.
Yeah, I see a big smile.
I'll turn on the lights.
Is that an okay place to cut it? Or did you want to keep going?
That's good.
Certainly a book worth reading.
It's actually a pretty good read. And if you listen to it on audio, he says that the voices of the people, some of the people in the story are in the recording, so you can hear them first person instead of a voiceover.
So you can get it on Kindle also.
Yeah, on Audible, you can get it on Audible, and probably at the library too.
Good content.
So you said, whoa, with a big smile. What was on your mind?
What she's saying is great.
Yeah.
I love a lot of the ideas. I love the entrepreneur, whatever it was.
Conflict entrepreneurs.
Conflict
Being a
entrepreneur. I mean,
political
it's
pundit.
still relevant to where we are now, from my point of view.
And it's so important to think about who in any kind of conflict, who is the influencer? You know, you really, I think that's a really important thing to nail.
Yeah. And who's making money off of it, right? In our world, we have all these media personalities
Whoa.
that make money off of it.
One of the things that's brought up to me was, we had attended a meeting, presentation by Tom Daschle and, I can't remember the senator, Trent Lott. Trent's a Republican, Daschle's a Democrat.
And when was that? Last
This
century?
was like 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And they were describing the damage that Newt Gingrich did to Congress by reducing the number of days that Congress met. That before that happened, everybody lived in Washington DC because they had to meet 5 days a week. And they went to parties together, they were godfathers for each other's children, even though they were different parties. And by reducing the time that Congress met to like 2 days a week or maybe 3, now almost no one lives in Washington DC. They fly in for a couple days and they go home and raise money. And so they don't know each other anymore. They only know each other as cartoons, and her suggestion for this describes possibly one of the main reasons Congress is so dysfunctional at this point. They just don't know each other as three-dimensional human beings. They're just cartoons to each other because
It seems to me now that there are many of them that want to be the influencer.
because they're making money on the
Because they're
side.
making money and getting a lot of money.
And they're getting raised money.
We don't have just one Newt Gingrich, we have many of them.
You're right. They brag about it.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a DC insider. I'm gonna be talking to my people. Look, I'm from Kansas. I'm not one of these DC, you know. But that's the problem, because they don't know each other. Wow.
Interestingly, it's always the ones that are benefiting on the cricket side. I personally have had an experience of being hired twice to change organizations. First, it was a savings and loans on the south side, and I became the enemy because of the change I was bringing along. A whole bank their self-presentation was not even professional enough. And the way they did things, I mean, how can you expect a teller taking tips behind the counter for the client? Everything they did was crooked. And when I came in, I tried to establish the change. I became the enemy. They said all sort of things they tried to do, get rid of me. But then I had to educate the CEOs and the CFOs and educate them to realize that, first of all, you were acquired and you were acquired for a reason. Because if you were going well, your company wouldn't have been sold to different people. So if you want to come back tomorrow to a job, then we have to change things. So it will get to a time that it will collapse and you won't get any of your benefits that you've already invested.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so it's always when you go in for it, bring a change along. People are afraid of change to begin with, and they are very complacent with what they were. And the organization is not theirs. So whether it thrives or not, they could care less. All they want is their paycheck, but they forget that you, the owner, you are robbing Peter to pay Paul to have it float, which is very difficult. So my little experience that I can relate to it, yes, to say.
Nancy?
I like that whole comment and concept of peripheral vision. And I see that going to bringing the problem into your emotional self and coming out with things like, I regret or I feel guilty that I killed this person or I killed 1 million people with a bomb, or, I mean, you become your own critic. But you can't do that without this idea of, and then I'm not sure, now I have to define peripheral vision, I don't know what to say.
I thought it was really interesting. She talked about, as a psychologist, it's really important to me, but she talked about the force of internal conflict. And you really have to, and so many people I think don't, and what are our psychological support resources available to this community? Very, very nil, and people dismiss it. But if we could really accept that and really look at that, what are my conflicts that I'm externalizing? Would be really, really critical.
Right. Eleanor?
I'm very interested in government because government impacts all of us at every level. And I want to get back to what Chuck was saying, and also, I think that someone made a comment, or maybe it was Amanda, about how they have a committee for modernization of the
Congress?
House, yeah, and that would be the Senate too. Because this idea of their only coming in for 2 days, because in Illinois, Senate and House of Representatives, they're there for weeks at a time. And really, would it be a wonderful idea if they were like in Washington DC, if they were meeting, let's say, for 3 weeks and then had 2 weeks off, or meeting for 4 weeks and then had 3 weeks off. And I mean, this is something I'd be willing to sign a letter for, because I think this is so important. And that idea of there being in one place at one time for a long period of time.
Working together. Has anyone had this conflict affected them personally in their lives? Like what?
Feeling of high conflict?
Do you have high conflict affecting you personally, or have you had it affecting you personally in your life?
Any stories you'd like to share?
I can't believe I'm the only one that holds the hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, no, I've experienced an immense amount of high conflict. I was raised in a high conflict family.
Can you tell us more about that, Jazz?
Well, my parents' relationship with each other started to go downhill when I was about 6. They ended up divorcing when I was 17. The aftermath of that led to my mother taking her life at the age, like a year later when I was 18. My father had a wish for one of his sons. I have 2 older brothers that he desperately wanted one of his sons to fulfill a dream that was my father's dream and not the dreams of my brothers. And one of the brothers became not capable of fulfilling the dream. And the second son said, no, that's not my dream. My father stopped speaking to him, and they never reconciled for decades.
Wow.
Oh. Amazing.
Now, JS, now that you brought up childhood, I was thinking about my childhood. I grew up with two families. My parents split before I was born, and my dad lived in Wonder Lake, my mom lived in Crystal Lake, and if you know the area, Crystal Lake's a little bit more nice than Wonder Lake, and my stepmother was always trying to say, oh, well, those people in Crystal Lake, and talk about the policies that the city had about building frontages and not being able to park 5 cars in the driveway, you know, and just that I always felt this binary that the town that I lived in was snobby, and she was trying to make it an us versus them all the time. Happily, it didn't stick with me, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't a comfortable place to be in. Nancy, did you want to share?
Oh, well, it's that old, that Christian church stuff. And it's very permeating and, lethal.
The easiest way to create belonging in a church community is to make the people who are not part of your community bad, right?
Yeah.
Those people
Right.
out there, but we are here and we know the truth.
But it's like a war. It's the same as World War II or anything. It's that lethal.
I married him. When I married John, he had been divorced from his wife for maybe 3 years. And, the conflict never stopped. And I feel like I dealt with it my whole life. And then even when she died, she still left a mess.
But death can help.
And it was, I thought it would help, but it couldn't. But his were so conflicted because there was always me versus them. And when she died, it still continued. Now, it's very different now, but one child is completely alienated from the entire family as a result of it. And it's just,
But if we had headlines,
drain on your life.
I have that experience in my childhood.
I was just saying that if we had headlines about those death conversations, I wish I did this or that. I think then I'm starting to understand the peripheral idea. Then you get above it all.
Yeah.
And it allows a freedom of conversation. Then you can go down and start digging up the dirt, you know? Am I just being too euphemistic? Can you understand what I mean?
Actually, I took that road with the kids and with my daughter, the eldest, which I could have had the most conflict with. I always tried to stay above the fray. Always above the fray. Always. And the younger the younger child that lived with us, she became I was her mother, really. I became her mother. And so I think staying above the fray really helped me. So now I have really great relationships with both of those kids.
Wonderful.
I think what you're getting at is actually what she says in this I tried to boil down some of the summaries from the book in this one handout. And investigating the understory and complicating the binary is part of what you're talking about, I think. Either staying above it or trying to dig deeper and say, but there's all these other things that happen in that conflict. So if you see like the third heading down, overcoming high conflict, there's some ideas. Amanda Ripley is a journalist, and some of her talks are to other journalists about how do we get out of how we are contributing to the situation. My thought for us was November happens to be election season. It also happens to be Thanksgiving season. And so many of us work so hard or have so much anxiety about the election. And then 3 weeks later, we have to sit at a table with our mother's brother's sister who we cannot have a conversation with. So I was hoping that we might be able to, these might be some tools to help us start some conversation that's not immediately getting to the binary. The questions down below, I love the one that says, what do you wish they understood about you? Like, what would you say about this conflict 10 years ago? You know, you're really angry about immigrants. What would you have said about this conversation 10 years ago, you know, for the, I'm trying to make a caricature of the Trump voter. When you find yourself in a high conflict situation, also ask about yourself. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? I like the idea about like, what do you wish your opponent understood about you, and what would you like to understand about them? I thought those were helpful. The main things, and then this handout is about looping. So one of the ways to de-escalate a conflict situation if you're talking to them is, and they teach this in conflict mediation courses as well, which I've taken, is to loop, which is basically you repeat back to them. You listen to what they're saying, you try to paraphrase the essence of what they said, you check in and say, did I get that right? And then you ask them to tell you more. So you're filling in the blanks, and that helps complicate that narrative, or dig in, get to the periphery, helps get away from the binary a little bit. And if and then you have to kind of bite your teeth and force yourself to listen a little bit longer, right? In order to get there. So looping is one. Her main point at the end of all of her talks is be curious. That conflict can be defeated by curiosity. If you just put yourself in a place of, I want to know why you think that. Where did you come to that experience?
It's really helped me to think about Trump by thinking about the trauma that he's had as a child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and how he's gotten to this point. And I think it's helpful with all kinds of other people to understand where they're coming, what is the pain, what's causing him to do it, and see them as a human being that's really struggling with, whatever. But really focusing on the human being part of it.
Yeah.
Looping, imagine how disarming it can be. The person you might have a conflict with, all of a sudden realizes they are listened to. You care about what they're thinking and what they're saying. Wow. Good place to start.
And then they said specifically avoid humiliation at all costs. He says humiliation is the nuclear bomb of conflict. And then if you think about that in the political system, think about those trigger points in the past 10 years of the entire time, there was the basket of deplorables. And then there was just this thing a few days ago where Biden responded to the garbage conversation about Puerto Rico, and it all got dredged up again. This idea of, we're being insulted. And so that humiliation is really a trigger that I feel like the former president understands. I think it gets under his skin, and he lashes out at it over and time again.
One sec, because Verna and Tom, you came in and probably missed all or most of what
I was
this
just
was.
looking for a flyer, none of the flyers.
Oh, did you get
I didn't
these?
get one, because I came in late.
How to loop in the high conference?
Yeah, I
Well,
think we can mind in a minute. I'm sorry. I just need to
Okay.
Just talking about
read off this real quick.
good conflict, being,
I can share an experience from being from Africa. Christendom is being something that is very vague, and in a Christian way of convincing people to be Christians, they end up bashing Muslims. They talk about how their religion is evil, that you never once see a Muslim trying to convert somebody, telling them their religion is bad. So it's kind of interesting. If a Christian would sit down and listen to themselves, or watch the approach these people are taking to get people to them, you will probably know where they're coming from and why, but you are pushing on them that your Bible says you're the only way to go, but they also have a belief in what they have. So in order to stay back and think about what you are telling them and how you can get them to follow you, that would make a change. Or we will see that both religions might have something when it's blended, can make us lead a better life or have a peaceful relationship.
Isn't that true of all of them? I mean, there's no other religion that tries to convert people to their religion that I'm aware of.
Well, that, like I said, that's what I've seen done.
It's the Muslims and, you know, it's not only Muslims, it's every other.
Are there missionaries, evangelicals, that spirit in every religion? I guess.
I don't think there are in any other religion. I mean, that's, I'm just making a statement of fact. I'm not trying to make.
No,
a
make me
because
wonder.
it's a good
Yeah.
point.
The Christians are the bigger evangelizers out there.
Judaism doesn't, Muslims don't, Hindus, I mean, so there is an inherent.
Okay, because every pulpit that is on a Sunday in course, that's why I tend to like my exposure to America and the way things are here, because you don't see that. But even here in America, every Sunday, every Ghanaian church you go to, a sermon sort of wind its way to telling somebody how evil their religion is.
Where does that come from? Does it come-
Well, we think when
Where's that?
Europeans, European crusaders that take back the Holy Land and all that.
No,
And
it
then
comes
colonialism.
from a psychological, zero thinking point, because they're so mixed up over one little thing. Like long ago, I suffered something or other. I think it's basically human frailty. I mean, in my sister's case, I did everything, and then suddenly I'm screaming, "You're an idiot." And there is no way I could get through, because every time I developed this conversation, she would answer only with a Bible phrase, and she knows it backwards and forwards.
I would guess there's also some white supremacy built in.
I'm sorry, what?
I would guess there's also some white supremacy built in. The idea that our religion is the best and that we are the saved people is that's kind of essentially white supremacy that was exported in colonialism and all across the
Well, not
globe.
necessarily a Christian problem, but a European one.
Yeah, I think it's culture
Do
blended
you
with
think it
religion.
came out of the original, well, I understand that a lot of the problems came out of the original, decision for religion become affiliated with government. You know, when,
I think that's been more common in other religions, right? I mean, there's been the opposite.
I mean, and they use religion to really organize their whole, organize power, organize the people and
Yes.
so on and so forth. So out of that became this,
Well, that's a huge
Oh,
topic.
sure, we can talk about how about Modi in India, right? Where Muslims don't feel safe.
Or Orban in Turkey.
So how do we square the statement here that Christians are evangelists, but no other religion is, when other religions are exclusionary? And therefore,
Yeah.
it's sort of like evangelism small, which is you exclude the others and other them and make them leave.
Yeah.
So that's a different form of evangelism, isn't it? It's-
Yes.
You either become Hindu in India or you're in really big trouble.
Yeah.
It isn't evangelism, it's
Actually,
extortion,
that's
isn't it? I mean, it's extortion.
that happened with the Mormons too.
It's fascism.
They
Yes.
move into an area,
So I
and
mean,
you
it's,
either become Mormon
maybe
or
this, yeah, I don't know, because it seems like it's practiced, but under a different.
I feel like that might be a.
But that's manipulation.
Sure.
Together.
There's a lot of
That's
different ways.
manipulation, which I think is equal to a Trump idea.
Manipulation or evangelism, like.
Yeah, well, that's true.
We
Is
subdivide
that our common denominator?
different, I guess, different levels of othering and what you do with it.
Well, politics and economics drives a lot of it. I mean, you go back to colonialization, they're trying to colonize, it really was feeding the economic engine of the mother of love. I mean, they felt that was true. Yeah, so there's.
That brings up the
There's
conflict.
another multi-dimensional.
Yeah, there's another form of taking advantage of others.
Can we bring it back to something smaller than more large work? I mean, what you're talking about is actually my jam, and I'd love to have take that whole class on that from the history of the world. But one thing I did want to bring up that she brings in her book as a very practical solution to the problems we are facing right now as voters is ranked choice voting. Have you all heard of this?
Oh, yeah, I think it'd be great.
That's beyond the binary way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's because it takes away the binary, and when you think about it deeply, ranked choice voting, which is basically, this is my first choice, but this is my second, this is my third. And if the first choice doesn't get the critical mass, then your vote is reallocated to somebody else.
Which state have that?
Maine and
Alaska?
Alaska. And Maine is one of the states that splits their electoral college. So there was an article in the AP just last week or the week before that said ranked choice voting could determine the outcome of the House. Because they will, I think it's the outcome of the president too, but the outcome of there's several Congress people that are going to be elected by ranked choice voting in Maine. So that
Nebraska could.
that's another split.
There's certain segments of Nebraska that elect their own one.
Omaha.
They split their electoral college.
Yeah.
And so Omaha will probably go blue.
One person, like in college, everybody else elects everybody else.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of,
Yeah, Maine and Nebraska are the only ones that split their electoral college, which I think is also another way to try to break down the binary.
That's a wonderful, that's one of my favorite concepts is ranked choice voting.
I really think it's one of the most important things we could do, because I don't see the way we get out of this world where we have so many conflict entrepreneurs that excel so much from making you hate the other side. Like, and I'm thinking Fox News. Fox News has been alive and powerful as long as I've been alive, and I've just watched it twist logic. When I worked in the healthcare field and healthcare reform, they were telling lies about healthcare. The way we get away from twisting truths, and undercut that, is go to ranked choice voting. And then you've gotten rid of the binary, and then you've gotten rid of the need and the profit for the electoral, for the conflict entrepreneurs.
How did they achieve that? Did they put it up for a vote in the?
I think it probably has to be a constitutional.
yeah, it's a state
constitution.
constitution.
We've used it in Winnetka for, town meetings when there are more than one candidate. So
Well, you all keep talking. I need to run down and put my robe on, but thank you for coming
We want
today.
soon. Thank you, Jessica. And I can't wait
can
to
we
read this book.
continue with this?
Yeah, let's maybe, well, next week, we're gonna start a 2-week series on women in the Old Testament,
Jessica?
in the Hebrew Bible, and then.
10 minutes before your, with the CNC, Erica will be there.
But maybe, I'll tell you, in the spring semester here, I think we have a couple open dates, if we'd like to maybe set another Sunday morning aside to follow up on this, because we can obviously go into the political and the psychological and everything else, just on how binary thinking wrecks everything. I feel like talking about Fox News, even before there was just the pure liars calling themselves news, it didn't just happen out of nowhere. There was, I remember, William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal would fight on PBS for the firing line. And then CNN in the 80s started this thing called Crossfire, where there were only two ways of thinking about everything. And it was a fight. I feel like sports defines everything, but voting for elected officials isn't like watching a game or watching ESPN, where there can only be one things.
Personality contest.
Right. And isn't there more to think about than just who won by a field goal? And the other team is nothing because they, lost the tip drill and
This is so important and relevant to us now. Wednesday night, I think the church is having something, pizza, I wish Jessica were here, pizza, and to talk about the conflict with but I'm almost wondering if we could move the women in the Bible to the spring and do more on this now. That's my own personal thing.
I think, also Jessica, maybe you can let her.
This will still be a problem in the spring.
Happens in 2 days.
I think we'll need another injection then as well. There'll be something else in this sure. It'll be local town voting in the spring, right? So.
It's nice. And how nice, another reason I want to read this book, Curtis Toller sounded familiar, that name. I think was here in church a couple of years ago. Remember when we had Chicago Cred
Yeah.
come and speak?
They were
And
here.
the sanctuary was packed. I'm trying to tell you. Yeah, that'd be great to have it back.
Hopefully we'll have it.
It was fun to hear her talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a group like that should get all the press nationally that they deserve.
That they deserve.
I think they're trying to
And
save
we can help
lives.
give it to them.
Yeah, give them a bigger voice.